ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to Friday Morning with Esther and Philip here on GB News, and we've got a fantastic show lined up for you today.
We certainly have. Straight after the news, as this week marked 3 years since we left the EU, we've got a Brexit heavyweight head-to-head between former House of Commons Speaker John Bercow and former Brexit Party leader Nigel Farage. You won't want to miss that.
And we really do have a packed show in its entirety, but we particularly want to hear from you on that sort of Brexit, what you think about it. So get in touch with your views, gbviews at gbnews.uk, or tweet us at gbnews. But first, here's your latest headlines with Rihanna.
Thank you, Esther. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The partner of a missing woman says he's focusing on staying strong for their two daughters. There are growing concerns for the welfare of Nicola Bulley, who went missing a week ago in Lancashire. The 45-year-old was last seen walking her dog just before 9 a.m. last Friday in St Michael's-on-Wyre. Her phone and pet were found by the river half an hour later. Lancashire Police says it's still treating her disappearance as a missing persons inquiry, but retired Met Police officer Graham Wetton says all possibilities need to be investigated.
You really start with investigating the person themselves. And again, that then means you have to speak to those closest to them to find out about what was going on in their life, how they felt. Has this happened before? So various lines of inquiry. They have to keep an open mind and look at everything. You've seen extensive searches going on. That's quite a steep riverbank from the pictures I've seen. Dog was found as well. The mobile phone was found. So they've got some lines of inquiry around the phone itself and investigating that, but still keeping an open mind a week on into the search.
British Gas is under pressure to compensate its vulnerable customers. It follows a Times investigation which found debt collectors broke into homes to forcibly install prepayment meters. Regulator Ofgem has ordered all domestic energy companies to suspend the practice and says it's opening its biggest ever market review into the meters. Anti-Brexit campaigner Gina Miller has become the latest person to accuse the Deputy Prime Minister of bullying. She says Dominic Raab launched an abusive attack and was aggressive and intimidating during an encounter in 2016. A source close to the Justice Secretary described the claims as malicious and baseless, saying they were timed to jump on a political bandwagon. Shadow Immigration Minister Stephen Kinnock says it's time for Mr Raab to go.
I think it's pretty clear now that everybody that works around him is going to have some serious doubts about whether or not they should be coming into work today. There seems to be a pattern of behaviour from Mr Raab, and it's not fair on his colleagues that they are having to work with somebody who is potentially a bully and a tyrant and somebody who disrespects the colleagues that he works with. So he should be suspended.
Rail passengers are facing more travel disruption today, with train drivers walking out for the second time this week. RMT and ASLEF union members are demanding better pay and conditions. Rail operators are warning services will be severely disrupted, with little to no trains running in some parts of the country. ASLEF General Secretary Mick Whelan says the union wants talks to continue to find a solution.
Quite deceitfully, the RDG put out a protocol which they led for a pay offer over 2 years that hadn't been discussed with this trade union, hadn't been through the framework agreement that we'd agreed with them to allow some sort of national talks to take place in our fractionalised industry, and it's probably set the whole process back months and months. If they want to negotiate via the media, I'll tell you what I want, and then you can relay it to them. They can come and talk to us in a few weeks' time. But we don't behave like that. We behave honourably. So we'll go back into talks on Tuesday in the hope that trust can be rebuilt and we can find a way forward.
A suspected Chinese spy balloon is being tracked by the US military. It's been spotted flying over America for a couple of days. Fighter jets were mobilised, but a decision was made not to shoot it down because the debris could pose a safety risk. It comes ahead of a trip to Beijing by the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. China says it hopes both sides can handle the matter calmly. New analysis shows the number of people in the UK diagnosed with cancer will rise by a third by 2040. Cancer research has found that if current trends continue, cases will rise from 384,000 per year to over 500,000 for the first time. The charity says that as well as an ageing population, obesity is also contributing to the rise. Oncologist Professor Carol Sikora says the government needs more focus when it comes to patients' care.
For a politician, they're not interested in what's going to happen in 15 years' time. This report is about 2040, after all. They're interested in what's going to happen when the next election comes along. And that's the whole problem with a politicised health service. It's based on the electoral cycle, which is short and doesn't allow long-term planning, which is what cancer research are calling for.
And Australian tennis player Nick Kyrgios has avoided a criminal conviction after he admitted he assaulted his ex-girlfriend. The charge related to an incident in 2021. The 27-year-old Grand Slam champion entered a guilty plea, but the magistrate later dismissed the case because he described it as minor and there was a low risk of reoffending. Kyrgios says he respects the court's decision and deeply regrets his actions. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Esther and Philip.
Thank you, Rhiannon. Now we're delighted to be joined in the studio today throughout the show by financial advisor Louise Oliver and Conservative peer Lord Daniel Moylan. So hello to you both.
Morning.
Great
Morning.
to have you here. Philip?
Well, it's been 3 years since Britain left the EU after years of acrimonious infighting over the 2016 referendum result.
The former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, won a barnstorming majority off the back of the result, with Labour scrambling to keep the party together.
But how times have changed. A recent poll by Unheard indicates that almost all British constituencies believe we were wrong to exit the European Union. So was Brexit a mistake? We're now joined by former Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow, as well as former leader of the Brexit Party and GB News presenter, Nigel Farage. Both of you, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Nigel, perhaps I could start with you, because we had this Unheard poll showed that 54% of the country agreed that Britain was wrong to leave the EU and only 28% disagreed. So it seems the majority now think leaving the EU was a mistake. What would you say to those people?
Well, it was a mistake to leave the European Union exit in the hands of something called the Conservative Party. They never believed in it from the start. They dragged their heels. We were put through 3 years of total misery. I mean, old Bercow here helped make it more difficult than it had to be. But the truth of it is, you know, I mean, to me, 3 years ago this week, we moved house, right? And there were lots of new rooms and lots of excitement. But to make it work, we had to be truly dynamic and make real change. And the truth is, most of those packing boxes are still there. I mean, even little wins like removing the 5% minimum VAT that Europe demanded on our domestic energy bills. Even things like that haven't been done. So what the polling shows is disenchantment. And if you ask me right now, am I disappointed with Brexit? I'm sorry to say, I'm going to have to say yes. So the government have made an absolute pig's ear of the whole thing in purely economic terms. In purely economic terms, right? Now, the sovereignty argument's simple. We're self-governing. There are no excuses. We've won back the birthright to mismanage our own country, and we're doing a jolly good job of that. We have our own foreign
I mean, it's easy to point the blame elsewhere, but do you think when the debate was going on, people should have been a little bit more honest and realistic about the time it would take to move on? Because certain things have happened. You're not paying into the EU budget, you've got freedom over your own laws, you've not got freedom of movement. The big things have happened, but those other things you're talking about, should you, as well, when you were championing it, be a little bit more honest about the time scale?
Yes, we should have triggered Article 50 on the 24th of June 2016. It should have been done immediately. If we'd done that, there wouldn't have been time for the Remainer, the second referendum, the mega whinge campaign. We should have got on with the job. We have done none of those things. And, there are 5.5 million men and women in this country running small businesses. They expected to see relief from excessive regulation. It'll be 7 years in a couple of months' time since that vote, and as yet, they've seen nothing. So, look, it's been horribly mishandled. I don't think there's any chance of it being reversed in terms of us joining. But I do feel that the next Labour government will probably keep us very tightly aligned to single market rules. And in the economic side of the argument, we just won't get the benefits. And it's very disappointing.
John, if I can bring you in here. I mean, Nigel's case is pretty much that it's not really Brexit that's at fault. It's the Conservative government that's implemented it, and perhaps people in Parliament, aided and abetted by you, who tried to frustrate it. But look, we were told that within weeks of voting to leave the EU, the economy would collapse. We'd need a punishment budget.
Project Fear.
Exactly. It didn't really happen, did it? What the people who campaigned for Remain said didn't. It might not have gone as well as Nigel thought, but it hasn't gone as badly as people said it would, has it?
Well, it's gone very badly indeed. I'm not going to be held responsible for what George Osborne did or didn't say or imply at the time. That isn't within my bailiwick. What I would say to Nigel, who's a cheeky chappie, he's an amiable rogue, some would say an incorrigible scoundrel.
So are you as well, John.
He does remind me of university days when one used to debate with members of the Socialist Workers' Party. And when they lambasted capitalism, international capitalism, global capitalism, those of us who took a different view would say, well, look at socialism. Look at the evidence in practice in the Soviet Union, to which they responded. They were a constantly moving target for saying, no, that's not real socialism. That's a distortion. That's debauch. That's state capitalism. With Nigel, instead of taking it on the chin and recognising that, in fact, to date, it has been a grotesque blunder and the biggest foreign policy mistake of the post-war period. What Nigel wants to do, because he can't abandon the religiosity of his lifelong support for Brexit, is to blame someone else. So it's mysterious forces. It's, if you like, a fifth or sixth estate. It's those Machiavellian types working night and day to frustrate the will of the British people or the designs of Farage. I mean, really, it is nonsense on stilts, Nigel. And to be honest, I say to you in all politeness and candour, you can do a bit better than that. Why not start by admitting, first, that people are poorer, wages are down. Foreign direct investment has slumped. Sterling has taken a permanent 10% hit. The economy has been hit to the tune of about 100 billion.
OK, well, let's bring Nigel in for some of the... Because other people might say COVID had that impact. So let's bring Nigel in.
Remember what Brexit's about. Remember, the big point of Brexit is to be a self-governing, democratic nation. And that means you can get things right and you can get things wrong. All right? Very simple, as opposed to the vast majority of our law, and certainly in commercial law, 80% of it being made somewhere else over which we have little say. So we're in charge. We can't blame Brussels anymore. But the point is, it's never a mistake for a country to be independent, sovereign and free. That is never, ever a mistake. My complaint is that the party that was given the job of carrying it out didn't actually believe in it. We started off with a negotiation that was always going to give us a rubbish deal. And there's so much more we can do. And you know, John, until last year, we were actually the fastest growing economy in the G7. Wages in the first 3 or 4 years after Brexit did go up quite appreciably. Now, you know, on economics, we can argue till the cows come home about whether it's hurt us, whether it's benefited us. My argument is this, that Brexit needed supply-side reform to maximise the potential benefits. That's about us becoming more competitive than our European neighbours. And we haven't done it. So my complaint, no conspiracy.
Nigel, I think that he's just about concluding. Nigel, I've listened carefully and with respect to that thesis, but what I say to you is this. It's one thing to excoriate Theresa May, or indeed before her David Cameron, by saying, well, neither of them was a believer in Brexit, and that would be true. I think she did her honest, plodding, inadequate, grossly unimaginative best, to be fair to her, but I accept that she presided over the matter in political terms with absolutely crass ineptitude. Where your argument seems to me to be on very difficult ground is that you can't very well lacerate Boris Alexander de Pfeffel on the same front. Boris Johnson came out explicitly in support of Brexit. He wanted Brexit. He favoured Brexit. He championed Brexit. He wanted, in fact, a Brexit not dissimilar to that which you support. And so if you argue the case, Nigel, as I know you would want candidly to do, fairly and honestly, look at Brexit under Bojo, not under May or Cameron or these secret Remainers or Ramonas, and it has been a terrible failure.
John, let me come in.
John, let me
just ask you a question here.
Allow Philip to be the speaker.
How can you be so sure that Brexit has failed? I mean, literally, we left the EU 3 years ago. Within 6 weeks, we'd got a COVID pandemic where the government, ridiculously in my opinion, but they locked down the country for 2 years, the economy. They literally paid people to do nothing. Clearly, there was going to be a massive economic consequence from locking down the economy. We're facing the consequences now of that, the spike in demand and the huge inflation that followed, the war in Ukraine with energy prices. We haven't really seen the evidence of Brexit, have we? Because everything has been coloured by what happened over COVID. So you're saying that because of everything collapsed during the lockdown, it's all Brexit's fault. It's not, is it?
I think that, if you'll forgive me saying so, and even frankly, Philip, if you won't, I would say that that is an act of self-delusion on your part. As you know, I've always given you the highest brownie points for your extreme candour, both in the chamber and outside. Look, of course.
Well, I'm going to join in with Philip here. I'm going to join in with, because I absolutely, locking the world down for 2 years has had a significant impact, and you can't throw that away. Over to you, John.
Esther, I don't disagree with either of you, or indeed with Nigel, if he were to say that COVID has had a deleterious impact. That, I think, is an incontestable fact about which we can quickly agree and move on. The issue is this. Given that very large numbers of other countries right across the world were negatively affected by COVID as well, how have they bounced back? It is a chronic state of affairs and a searing, coruscating indictment of Brexit that nearly 2 years after the worst of it, we are predicted in 2024, Nigel, by the OECD to be the worst performing economy of all. Now, I think if you're going to operate in the spirit of fairness, you have to say you can't blame that on COVID. So no doubt Nigel will retreat into his right-wing laugh and say, no, it's the fault of the Ramonas. They are becoming
Hang on, John. Let Nigel get a word in.
Brexit did not force this government into giving us the highest tax burden in 70 years, productivity that is 20% below that of France. I mean, I can't believe I've never seen a Frenchman work, and yet our productivity is lower than theirs. We have made a hash of this. But I will say this to you. Because of Brexit, we've signed the AUKUS deal with Australia, a very significant, important foreign policy development. Because of Brexit, we've taken the lead in Ukraine. Now, you can agree or disagree with that position, but it wouldn't have happened as members of a European Union. Because of Brexit, we were able to get a quick, fast, effective vaccine rollout, whilst the rest of Europe was waiting for some woman from Cyprus who hadn't even been elected to make decisions.
We had a very successful rollout of the vaccine because of exemplary conduct by suppliers and British public servants.
John, let Nigel finish. John,
let Nigel finish. We'll come back to you. We will come back to you, John.
Be my guest, but unfortunately, you suffer from the disadvantage of being wrong.
We haven't rewarded Brexit voters and much of working class Britain with the genuine rewards that could have come. And I go back to that point. Just taking the 5% VAT off domestic fuel would have been a very clear Brexit win. But the big one, and this is what no one wants to talk about, and as I speak to you, I'm looking over the English Channel, all right? Now, there are no dinghies today, but on many days I can see them from this very room. We voted, millions of extra people turned out in that referendum who don't normally vote. And they did it to get back control of our borders and to reduce the numbers coming into Britain. That has been a catastrophe. And that has nothing to do with Brexit. It's actually to do with the Tory government and the fact we haven't completed Brexit by leaving
We're going to have to end it there because we're running out of time.
John, listen to that. And I understand your strength of feeling, and I don't dispute.
John, you can't just keep talking.
Let me put it to you like this and see.
Okay, well, if we just cut them both off, we've now got to go to the break.
John,
we should have a round two.
John, can I just ask? John,
wants extra week for the National Health Service.
Okay,
John, please.
Oh, John, please, can we cut John off now if he's not going to cut himself off?
It's.
So look, we're going to come back into the studio. We're going to speak to our guests here. You heard what John had to say. We all heard what John had to say. You also heard what Nigel Farage had to say. You've also got to remember there's been 7,000 more regulations which has been implemented in the EU, which hasn't been implemented here since we left the EU. So what do you think as our viewers? Do email us, let us know what you think about Brexit. So over to you,
Daniel. What did you make of that?
Well, it's all so hat, isn't it? So old hat. I mean, it sounds like we're going back 5 or 6 years and having the same argument. John Bercow, I mean, admittedly, he was Speaker then, so he had to operate behind the scenes. But John Bercow, batting for Remainers as furiously as he can, and Nigel Farage making his case for leaving. None of it matters. We've left the European Union. There is no conceivable circumstance in which we're going to go back for decades. Maybe they wouldn't have us back. I mean, and anyway, we'd make sure that they knew that if we did go back, we'd be out again in 5 years' time. Why would they have us in those circumstances? So this is not going to happen. We need to focus on the future, forget about Brexit, forget about the EU, and get on with life. We have some outstanding problems with the European Union, especially over their undemocratic colonial rule in Northern Ireland. That's got to come to an end. But apart from that, we need to get on and make our own lives. That's what we should be focusing on.
Louise, from a business point of view, what do you make of Brexit and how it's gone over the last 3 years?
Well, I, like Nigel, feel disenchanted with it, and I think a lot of people do. And we've really got to grab this now. And I was speaking to a woman entrepreneur, I head up a UK women entrepreneurs group, and she said the bureaucracy and the red tape, it's a nightmare trying to deal with, international exports. On a positive note, she did say to me, with sterling being weaker, she's taken the opportunity to export over to America, for example. So businesses are really trying to do what they can to make this work, but they're disenchanted, and we need to, do something about it.
The point we put across, because you can conflate two things, can't you? Whether it's upset from Brexit or whether it is the world having closed down for 2 years because of the lockdown and COVID. Which would you say has had the bigger impact on business?
Yeah, well, we locked the world down for 2 years, and it's all about saving the NHS. So the focus has shifted away from Brexit, dealing with all of that, all the bureaucracy, to let's save the NHS, and actually that hasn't worked very well, has it?
Daniel?
Well, I'm interested to hear about... I'm delighted that Louise's colleague, or friend, is exporting to the United States. presumably she has to fill in a load of forms to export to the United States. Why is it such a problem to fill in some forms to export to the European Union as well? That's the world we live in.
Very good point indeed. And we'll be back with you. Step up, we'll be back with you both in a moment. But it's been nearly a year since Russia shocked the world by launching an illegal invasion of Ukraine. While Britain was quick to come to the defence of the Ukrainian people, as Nigel Farage was saying just a moment ago, offering up weapons and even homes.
A recent YouGov poll, though, suggests support from the UK is waning. Only a quarter of Brits believe we should be giving the beleaguered nation more support. We're joined now by leader of the Heritage Party, David Curtin, and the military historian, Peter Caddick-Adams. Thank you both indeed for joining us. David, if I could start with you. Look, you know, Ukraine was a sovereign nation. It was attacked and invaded illegally by a dictator who rules the end of the Soviet Union. Surely those of us who believe in the rule of law and international stability should be doing everything we can to make sure that Ukraine prevails, shouldn't we?
I don't agree with what you said in your question there. There were some opinions you put in there. And the thing is, with this conflict, it's actually started in 2014. We had the Minsk agreements where there was an agreement between NATO powers and Russia and Ukraine to give Crimea autonomy and to give the Russian-speaking people in the Donbass autonomy as well. But those agreements are broken. And what you have is the Ukrainian regime, the Poroshenko and then the Zelensky regime afterwards, have been bombing and shelling ethnic Russians in the Donbass area for 8 years, with 14,000 people at least being killed. And so I think what's happened there is that Putin has basically gone in what he calls a special military operation in order to try to protect the lives of Russian people in the Donbass, because Western governments in NATO were actively arming the Ukrainian government, which actually is filled with real Nazi battalions like the Azov battalion and the Right Sector and so on. So it's not quite as how you laid out in your question. And the thing is, I think people in this country are completely fed up of it, because it's got really nothing to do with the lives of ordinary people in the UK, and are fed up of the government, in power in London, sending billions and billions of pounds of money and weapons to Ukraine when actually energy prices are going up here. Life is tough here. And we want the government to be concerned about what's happening in this country and not prolonging and escalating a conflict in Ukraine, which could get out of hand. And we don't want that to happen.
Let's bring Peter in. So, Peter, what do you make of what David's just said? I mean, look, you know, he's clearly not alone, as we pointed out from that YouGov poll. So, what would you say to him and people who agree with him?
Well, the YouGov poll, for a start, sort of suggests that people don't want any more aid to go to Ukraine, or less. But no one was objecting to the aid that has already been sent. And I think that's a really important red line to draw in the sand. So people aren't objecting per se to the support that the United Kingdom has given to Ukraine. It's where we go from here. And clearly tanks are perceived as a great game changer. Now, I'm really puzzled by David's sort of point of view, because it's completely contrary to the facts as I know them. And, you know, I've been to Ukraine. I suspect David may not have done. But even if he has, I mean, there are three different ways you can look at this. The first is a traditional pacifist Quaker point of view of being anti-military, anti-supporting anything. And I would respect that. The second is an isolationist point of view. This is nothing to do with the United Kingdom. And therefore, we shouldn't have anything to do with nasty foreign wars. And, you know, that's a position that the Republican Party in the United States are grappling with. And certainly there are people in the United Kingdom who support that point of view. The third is to believe what Russia is saying. The Kremlin arguments, the Putin suggestion that this is all the West's fault, that really Russia is very nice and they haven't invaded in 2014. And this is a NATO Western conspiracy to do the Russians down. I can't quite understand where David's point of view is. It seems to be hovering between isolationism or being pro-Russia.
Peter,
I mean, there's no... Yeah.
Can you understand, though, if the British public is getting wary, if they're looking at how long is it going to go on, what are the financial impacts going to be to the country? We've got the cost of living here, we've got many issues here, and that support could be waning. What would you say to them?
Okay, so that's a very good point. And clearly, the impact of life at home makes a huge difference to our perception of how we help people overseas. But there's a moral point of view here which just hasn't been examined, which is when you see oppression overseas, how much do you reach out and try and help? And we've been doing that financially. I mean, I could respond by saying, well, we've got all these tanks in the United Kingdom that aren't doing anything that we've already paid for. So why aren't we sending them over there? Why all the military kit has already been bought and paid for?
So, David, do you object to that? What Peter said, you know, we've got these tanks here, send them over.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that Peter said that I would disagree with. And first of all, that the idea that nobody disagreed with the government mainstream line on this from the very beginning. There were a lot of people like me who were calling for negotiation and de-escalation from the very beginning. What he said about tanks there, I mean, I completely disagree. The UK only has 227 tanks in total. So if we give 12 tanks to Ukraine, that's not going to do anything at all. It's just going to prolong this for a few more weeks, if you like. And we will only have 215 tanks left. Well, we are depleting our own arsenal and sending it to Ukraine completely pointlessly. And the other thing I would say is that there's about 30 to 40 different conflicts going on around the world. We hear nothing on the mainstream media or from the government about the conflicts in Kashmir, in Yemen, in Eritrea, in Honduras, and central Nigeria. Nobody cares about those things. But this thing in Ukraine, suddenly, it's all over everywhere and everybody.
Just very quickly. I mean, if you can, because we're running out of time. But you know, it seems to me that the argument that you're making today is very similar to what people might have said back in 1939 about how we shouldn't do anything about Hitler. Hitler claimed he was just defending his own Germanic people, and that it was a rather defensive thing, and that appeasement doesn't work with these people, does it? Surely we should learn from history that if you just appease these people and show that you're not going to do anything, they'll just keep going and going and going. Aren't you sort of making an argument that the same argument would have made for not going to war with Hitler?
No, I completely disagree with that. And you know, some people have said that, you know, this is the kind of thing, if you don't agree with the government, if you don't agree with the mainstream line, then you're accused of being like Hitler or being Putin's puppet or something. I mean, these are just smears that people throw out, which rather than engaging in the argument that we shouldn't be sending money and weapons to Ukraine, which actually is infested with Nazis who fly swastikas and who wear the Wolfsangel, the double SS on their uniform. So actually, we are funding Nazis and Nazi battalions in Ukraine. So it's exactly the opposite of what you said in your question.
David, we'll have to bring it to an end here. I could see Peter there shaking
violently disagreeing with what you were saying.
Vigorously. So we'll thank you both for that. But we will carry on the debate in the studio because we are a station that allows people to say different points of view and people can come to that conclusion. I don't know, Louise, what did you think there about whether it was appeasement, whether it was just we're not hearing all the facts? And whether the public are waning, you know, the support here is waning for this war in Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why the support is waning. People are feeling the pinch. They're also very angry about the billions that's being wasted, government money. We've got 7 million a day on illegal immigrants. We've got the COVID loans to companies that didn't exist. We've got the PPE, all of that. So when you take that in the round, people are feeling really angry. My view is, you know, we can't let Putin win. We have to keep supplying the services, the armaments, whatever we can do. For how long, I don't know the answer to that. On a positive note, if we are needing to replenish our stock, whether it's tanks or armaments, then surely that has a positive for our economy because our businesses are going to have to, you know, build these and manufacturing hopefully has a positive effect.
Daniel, I guess people might be getting weary because we seem to be at stalemate in Ukraine and neither side seems to be able to...
Well, you thought there might have been a quick end and now it's not.
Do you not, I mean, do you not think that all we're doing is perpetuating a stalemate at the moment?
Yeah, well, wait a moment. Look, we're getting a bit weary. Think what the people of Ukraine are feeling at the moment. They must be bloody weary, not having homes, being refugees in their own country and being subject to bombs being thrown in. I've never heard David Curtin talk so much rubbish. I mean, the special military operation, or whatever it's called, was an attempt to annex the entire country. It wasn't a let's protect a few Russian or the Russian-speaking population in the Donbass. It was full-on tank charge, got stuck in the mud, down to Kiev. The reason people are wary, there are two reasons. The first is the government hasn't explained, especially since Boris left, hasn't explained to the British people that the reason we have to worry about Putin is a threat to us.
Right, well, we'll end there and we'll come back a little bit later on, because coming up, we'll be joined by the MP for Don Valley, Nick Fletcher, to discuss whether UK men are facing a health crisis. But first, it's time for your news headlines with Rihanna.
Esther, thank you. It's 10:34, your top stories from the GB newsroom, and we start with some breaking news. Disgraced pop star Gary Glitter has reportedly been freed from jail after serving half of his 16-year sentence for sex offences. The 79-year-old, who had a string of hits in the 1970s, was jailed in 2015 for sexually abusing 3 schoolgirls. It's understood the sex offender has left a low-security prison in Dorset. He'll now be subject to licence conditions. The partner of a missing woman says he's focusing on staying strong for their 2 daughters. There are growing concerns for the welfare of Nicola Bulley, who went missing a week ago in Lancashire. The 45-year-old was last seen walking her dog just before 9 a.m. last Friday in St Michael's-on-Wye. Her phone and pet were found by the river half an hour later. Lancashire Police says it's still treating her disappearance as a missing persons inquiry, but retired Met Police officer Graham Wetton says all possibilities need to be investigated.
You really start with investigating the person themselves. And again, that then means you have to speak to those closest to them to find out about what was going on in their life, how they felt. Has this happened before? So various lines of inquiry. They have to keep an open mind and look at everything. You've seen extensive searches going on. That's quite a steep riverbank from the pictures I've seen. Dog was found as well. The mobile phone was found. So they've got some lines of inquiry around the phone itself and investigating that, but still keeping an open mind a week on into the search.
British Gas is under pressure to compensate its vulnerable customers. It follows a Times investigation which found debt collectors broke into homes to forcibly install prepayment meters. Regulator Ofgem has ordered all domestic energy companies to suspend the practice and says it's opening its biggest ever market review into the meters. The Deputy Prime Minister is facing fresh bullying allegations. Anti-Brexit campaigner Gina Miller has become the latest person to accuse Dominic Raab. She says he launched an abusive attack and was aggressive and intimidating during an encounter in 2016. A source close to the Justice Secretary described the claims as malicious and baseless, saying they were timed to jump on a political bandwagon. And rail passengers are facing more travel disruption today, with train drivers walking out for the second time this week. RMT and ASLEF union members are demanding better pay and conditions. Rail operators are warning services will be severely disrupted, with little to no trains running in some parts of the country. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Esther and Philip will be back in just a moment.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 10:38. Now, are men facing a health crisis? That's what Don Valley MP Nick Fletcher believes, and he's raised the issue in Parliament, calling for the government to introduce a men's health strategy, and we're delighted to say that he joins us now. Nick, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to join us this morning. Why do we need a men's health strategy?
Well, the statistics for men are really quite appalling. I mean, 13 men a day are taking their own life through suicide. 88 men are dying prematurely with heart disease. 33 men a day are dying of prostate cancer. 95% of all workplace deaths are men. If these statistics were any other demographic, there'd be an outcry, and we need to sort this out, and we need to look at it as soon as possible. This is urgent.
I mean, some people say that the health service was built by men for men, and therefore that's why we don't need a men's health strategy. And why we need a women's health strategy. So what do you say to people who say that?
No, that's wrong. I mean, as I say, the statistics are proof for themselves. Men just generally don't tend to look after themselves, which is the way that we are, and we don't have the reasons to go to GPs and as often as what many women do. It's just the way that they are. I know many men who have not been to see their GP for maybe 5-10 years. It's just not something that we do. There's no reason for men to go. Women have lots of different reasons to go.
Nick, do you not just need then an awareness campaign rather than a health strategy if it's about making men aware of their sort of medical needs? Is that just not what you need?
No, I don't think it is. I mean, it's okay. I mean, we can highlight lots of things, and I think that's what we tend to do a lot of in politics. We highlight these things, but then we don't actually move forward with anything. It's okay highlighting them, but I mean, if that's all we're doing, where's the gain? And whatever we're doing at the moment is obviously not working. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to read out the statistics that I've just read out.
Any discussions with the minister about this? And if so, what have they said? How likely are the government to introduce a men's health strategy as you're urging them to do?
Well, the previous health secretary was very positive towards it. Obviously, we've had a change, but I met with Maria Caulfield on Wednesday this week, and she's open to the idea about it. I do believe we need a consultation period first. I think that's important. We've done it. This has happened for the women's health strategy. There was a consultation piece done, and the women's health strategy is coming to place now. And I think they're just in their first year with that, so they are hoping for some success there. And we support that. I mean, it's important that we have a health strategy for women, but it's equally important that we have one for men too. And we wouldn't be the first country to do it. I mean, there's one in Ireland, there's one in Australia, there's one in Canada too. So it's something that the rest of the world is beginning to recognise.
Thank you very much indeed. See, we've got a women's health strategy, need a men's health strategy, and that's what. Yeah, and he'll say that's equality or fairness.
He's very persistent about this as well, Nick. He's been campaigning on this for quite some time.
And so are our viewers with their views on the Brexit debate. We had a little bit earlier on with John Bercow and Nigel Farage. Sandra says Brexit has not had a chance due to the pandemic and the war in Ukraine, so people should not be blaming Brexit for the state of the economy.
Joseph says, along with most of the other promises in their manifesto, Brexit has not been completed in any way. Ronald says the Conservative Party is 300% responsible for the poor rollout of Brexit, which was a point, I think, that Nigel Farage was making. And Margaret says, of course, we should continue to reach a satisfactory conclusion to our exiting of Europe. That's what the majority of the British public voted to do. We are not a tin pot dictatorship regime where whatever the public chooses, they know best. We are not a load of idiots. Thank you very much. Keep those views coming in about that Brexit debate that we had earlier between John Bercow and Nigel Farage.
Now, the Bank of England.
Very difficult to manage.
Well,
John Bercow was particularly difficult to manage.
John should
He'd
know
have never
better.
would have allowed that from us when he was Speaker of the House of Commons. That's all I can say.
And I was just about to say that John would not have had that in the House of Commons,
No.
but he's gone rogue. He's gone totally rogue now. And because he couldn't speak for so long, now he just wants to speak.
Some people think he went rogue when he was Speaker of the House of Commons, but that's a different issue.
And true. Anyway, the Bank of England has announced that Britain's recession is likely to be much shallower than feared, with the economy having grown by 0.1% over November last year.
But how much can we rely on these forecasts? Here to tell us more is GB News economics and business editor Liam Halligan. Liam, thank you so much. We get all these forecasts. You know, the Bank of England are saying the recession is going to be shallower than they thought it was going to be. The IMF say that we're going to be in a recession. I just wonder, how much are these forecasts worth the paper they're written on? Because it seems to me that none of them ever seem to come true.
Oh, you did a bit of a eye roll thing going on there, Liam.
Well, you know, I've got lots of letters after my name for various economics degrees. I was a professional economist. And forecasting is a useful exercise. It means you get together all the evidence you can, you think very hard about particular issues. But economics is never a science. It's a dismal science. That's the sobriquet. And forecasts aren't destiny. That's all I would say. The Bank of England was, in my view, ridiculously gloomy until yesterday. It was saying that the UK would stay in recession for almost 2 years, the longest slump pretty much of modern times. It's now saying that the UK will stay in recession for about a year or just over a year. So it's still quite gloomy, as is the IMF. I think they're both not really understanding what's happening in business. If you look at what stock markets are doing, there's a sense that a corner now is being turned. There's a sense that inflation is coming down. People like me who look closely at supply chains and talk to business leaders here in the UK and across the world, there's an urgency that we want to get out of this funk. The animal spirits, as John Maynard Keynes called them, are starting to stir. And I'm not saying, I'm not going to, channel Norman Lamont and say there are green shoots coming, but I do think the worst of this slowdown is over. I do think the worst of inflation is over. I do think interest rates have either peaked or will peak at just 4.25%. And by the way, I've been saying that for months and was called ridiculous. And now the financial markets think that's true too.
I think our concern and most people's concern is it becomes front page news, this doom and gloom. And that means you should change who you've got in the, exchequer. That means you should change political party. That means you should change something different. And actually, there are just, maybe this could happen, not this is. So it's the impact on policy decisions and, I don't know, people who run businesses.
These Whitehall bean counters and pencil suckers, right? They haven't really done any business in their life. They've often gone straight from university into these institutions, which are very much echo chambers of opinion. They don't really get out very much. If you get out a lot and you've been in business, as I have, and you understand business, there is an urgency now to get out of this slowdown. I'll tell you what business leaders want. They want Rishi Sunak not to raise corporation tax from 19 to 25%. On March the 15th. They want him to at least freeze corporation tax at 19%. Because there's the expectation it will go up, because it's been legislated for, just to freeze the tax. It wouldn't be a tax cut, but it would feel like a massive boost to the economy. And I think the modelling you get from central banks around the world, it's not just the Bank of England, and there are decent people in the Bank of England, but I do think they're constrained by their worldview. It isn't dynamic modelling. They don't understand how policy can impact outcomes through impacting sentiment.
After Liz Truss, when they got rid of it, Liz Truss was like, the tax, yes, you can't do that, you can't cut taxes. The next minute now, they could go into recession, cut taxes. So you can't really listen to what they say. So those forecasters, they seem to change their mind all the time. I could see Louise there completely agreeing with what you said about how we need to boost the confidence of business. And I guess, Daniel, you're agreeing that as well, what we need to do to give them some hope and optimism.
I think we're sort of constrained by the Office for Budget Responsibility. I mean, civil servants are paid to be extremely cautious, right? But you need political leadership here. And leadership involves sometimes taking calculated risks, and that's what we need to do. Taxation's at a 70-year high. To me, it makes no sense to increase tax rates even more. We'd be the only major economy in the world doing that as we're trying to get out of this slowdown.
I mean, the thing of forecasting interests me because what staggered me, I mean, I can understand why you make a forecast for the future and it's wrong. What staggered me over recent weeks is that the ONS have made forecasts about what's actually happened.
And got it wrong.
And got it massive.
Okay, in defence of the Office for National...
Don't bother.
they just to give an example, they suggest that the UK's average output per hour worked growth was 5% during 2020 and 2021. And they've now revised it and said, oh, actually, it wasn't a 5% growth. It was minus 0.3%.
That is a big adjustment. So the Office for National Statistics, I do think they did a decent job during the COVID lockdown, monitoring the pandemic. I do think in general they do a decent job. They've got a good international reputation. They don't really do forecasting, and they're not a political organisation at all, as you know. But when you're measuring GDP, the sum total of all transactions in the economy, it does take a long time to collate them. So any GDP number, it will bring out a preliminary number, and then 3 months later, there'll be a revised number, and then there'll be a final number. So they have three kind of bites of the cherry.
Then it's sort of the way the newspapers cover it, and they should have a health warning. Not that this is the definitive, all-seeing crystal ball, we know what's happening. It should be, this is a maybe, this is a possibility. I want to bring in Louise here with, how do you, how much notice do you take of these forecasts?
Well, I agree with Liam. I mean, there is some element of forecasting does help to a certain extent, but we need to take them with a pinch of salt. And we shouldn't be talking ourselves into this doom and gloom. And the headlines are saying we're going into recession. So what people are saying is, I won't go book that holiday then, I won't go out for a meal, and that is self-fulfilling in a way.
And if you're a business, I won't employ this,
Absolutely.
I won't buy that new machinery.
We need to grow our way out of this, and that 6% corporation tax hike that's coming around the corner could be the nail in the coffin for some of the businesses. So it's not going to cost anything, because it hasn't come in yet. This is something that it hasn't introduced yet, so we need to do that, focus on growth. The biggest risk we have at the minute to inflation is this tight labour market and the strikes.
Daniel,
that's so inflationary.
I was struck by something that Liam said, which I think probably is... Yeah. Well, I always am. I mean, you are the doyen of economic experts, in my opinion, Liam. But...
I need more time.
Can I tell you, that's high praise indeed.
But it's true. But it was the point he made about how much focus the politicians put into pleasing the Office of Budget Responsibility. And perhaps when it comes to... So when the Chancellor comes to make his budget, it seems, Liam made this point, I don't think many people have cottoned onto this, but I think there's a lot of truth in this, that Jeremy Hunt will be more concerned with what the Office of Budget Responsibility will make of what he announces in terms of what they then publish, rather than necessarily what's in the best long-term interests of the economy. And I wondered, maybe it was a mistake for George Osborne to set up the Office of Budget Responsibility. What do you think?
Well, it turns out to be a huge mistake, and it was the OBR that brought down Liz Truss, and Jeremy Hunt was put in there back in September precisely to make the figures add up so he could get a green tick from the OBR. And, of course, he'll be looking exactly at the same thing next time round. But who are these people? I mean, I would not ask the OBR the price of a bottle of milk next month. They wouldn't know. I mean, why on earth would you expect them to know what the economy is going to do that'll have the budgetary effects they're meant to be measuring? They don't do forecasting, as I understand it. They take forecasts from other people. But it just pushes the circle back. These are all based on highly dodgy models, the sorts of models, mathematical models, that gave us the COVID forecasts that drove us wrongly into lockdown, as we can now see in retrospect. And I don't trust them at all. As I say, they wouldn't know the price of a bottle of milk in a week's time. So why would you...
And that's why we want to talk about it today, because people do as if it's the oracle, the words from pie, that these are right and we must follow it. And we just needed to talk about
what
today
economists
they're not that good.
What economists do, and I've done this for a living for a long time, including at the International Monetary Fund, by the way, where I used to work. What economists do, and they won't thank me for saying this is educated guesswork with a lot of mathematical hocus-pocus thrown in to make it look scientific. That's what's basically happening here. I'm not saying you just stick your finger in the air and guess. You have to have a feel for the economy. Yes, you have to, as we say, interrogate the data, but you also have to talk to people, business leaders. Are they going to press that button and build that factory? Are they going to employ that extra 10 people? Are they going to move to a higher growth area? What's the tax policy coming down the track? This is all a very complex set of information that economic forecasting can't possibly hope to include in these numbers they produce. They are a guide. They should not be dictating how we run our country.
I was just wondering if I was going to be sympathetic to these forecasters. I could say, well, perhaps the forecasts were accurate, but then the government changes policy, which then changes the outcome? Is there any justification in that?
It's a moving feast. You need what we call dynamic analysis with everything moving around, not what we call comparative statics. This situation and then that situation, holding all other assumptions. It's a very, very difficult task, and I do believe that the OBR has become overmighty. I think the Bank of England's become overmighty, by the way, and I'm a huge supporter of Bank of England independence.
Well, I just look at this again, front page again of the papers, and this is the sort of the Bank of England talking about the damage to the workforce and we'll never recover. Again, gloom and doom, negativity, and it's maybe that'll happen, or maybe we can get it right and we can get people into work. But I think
maybe it's self-fulfilling.
But it is this dampening of
That's
us
the
all,
problem.
isn't it?
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah. It's the problem. The global economy is forecast to grow. We've got China that's being released from a lockdown. They've saved. So there's chance that the economy will grow when that money hits and they start to spend and they're released buying goods and services.
Do you know what? I feel so much better for having you here.
Yeah.
Let's be positive.
Rid of those front pages. I feel so much better. Phil.
Liam, thank you for a very fascinating insight, as always. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks. Now, today, train passengers are facing another day of travel chaos. Drivers are striking for a second time this week, causing most services across England to be cancelled.
Train drivers working under ASLEF and the RMT unions are walking out over an unsettled dispute concerning pay, job security and working practices.
And operators say strike action may also affect services on Saturday. So is there any end in sight? Our national reporter Paul Hawkins joins us from Euston Station. Paul, what's happening today? Looks to be lots of action on the picket line, but not much action elsewhere on the railways.
That's pretty much it, to be honest, Philip. A picket line here this morning at Euston where there are no trains running. 80% of trains across Great Britain not running today, and most of them in England. But there is a knock-on effect, of course, for trains that travel into Scotland and Wales, Northern Ireland as ever, unaffected. And you were saying, is there an end in sight to this dispute? Well, with ASLEF, there certainly doesn't appear to be. Mick Whelan, the General Secretary of ASLEF, pretty unhappy, pretty angry with the deal from the Rail Delivery Group. That's the group that represents train companies. They've put an offer on the table of 4% backdated to last year and 4% this year in terms of pay increase, but with conditions attached, which Mick Whelan says is unacceptable. Here's what he's had to say about how the talks are going this morning.
Conceivably, the RDG put out a protocol which they led for a pay offer over 2 years that hadn't been discussed with this trade union, hadn't been through the framework agreement that we'd agreed with them to allow some sort of national talks to take place in our fractionalised industry, and it's probably set the whole process back months and months. If they want to negotiate via the media, I'll tell you what I want, and then you can relay it to them. They can come and talk to us in a few weeks' time. But we don't behave like that. We behave honourably. So we'll go back into talks on Tuesday in the hope that trust can be rebuilt and we can find a way forward.
So, interestingly, what Mick Whelan also had to say was that he thinks strikes are more strike dates will be announced. He says it's highly unlikely they will be. But in terms of the RMT, there could be a settlement next week. There's an offer that's been put on the table by the government. They're consulting their members. Spoke to Mick Lynch on Sunday. He said they're going to come back next week with an answer on that deal. So there's potentially a settlement there with the RMT. But in terms of ASLEF, the majority of which look after the train drivers, it looks like this dispute could carry on unless there's a significant movement from the Rail Delivery Group.
Not quite as nice there as it was in Qatar, is it?
That's where we last saw him, at Qatar at the World Cup. But no, he's got a different backdrop now with a total different weather.
He's a scarf on today.
Yeah, and a different story, a miserable story. The strikes need to stop and the country needs to get back working again. Anyway, that's it for the first hour. Coming up, we'll be speaking to an award-winning entrepreneur about why he is so opposed to people working from home.
And were face masks a big con? And how many COVID boosters should we be taking? We'll be joined in the studio by Professor of Microbiology, David Livermore.
And we've got our guests still in the studio as well. Fantastic.
So stay with us.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, Rishi Sunak has passed 100 days in office and will be speaking to a Boris Johnson and Liz Truss supporting Tory MP on how they think Rishi has been doing.
And we were speaking to an award-winning entrepreneur about why he's so opposed to people working from their homes.
And were face masks a big con? And how many COVID boosters should you be taking? We'll be joined in the studio by Professor of Microbiology, David Livermore. But first, here are your latest headlines with Rhiannon.
Philip, thank you. Good morning. It's just gone 11 o'clock. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The partner of a missing woman says he's focusing on staying strong for their 2 daughters. There are growing concerns for the welfare of Nicola Bulley, who went missing a week ago in Lancashire. The 45-year-old was last seen walking her dog just before 9 a.m. last Friday in St Michael's on Wyre. Her phone and dog were found by the river half an hour later. Nicola's partner, Paul Ansell, says he hopes people will come forward with new information.
I just can't believe that we're a week on, and as yet, it seems like we're no further on. It just seems absolutely impossible. Just like a dream. I just cannot get my head around any of it.
I mean, you're left sort of trying to make sense of the census, aren't you? It is just such a mystery.
Yeah, it is. There's just no... Every single scenario comes to a brick wall, every single one of them. And then all we're doing is sitting there going round and round and round, going through every scenario, and then go back to the first scenario again, and do the whole thing again. And it's just all day long. That's all we're doing. That's all we're doing.
Disgraced pop star Gary Glitter has reportedly been freed from jail after serving half of his 16-year sentence for sex offences. The 79-year-old, who had a string of hits in the 1970s, was jailed in 2015 for sexually abusing 3 schoolgirls. It's understood the sex offender has left a low-security prison in Dorset. He'll now be subject to licence conditions. British Gas is under pressure to compensate its vulnerable customers. It follows a Times investigation which found debt collectors broke into homes to forcibly install prepayment meters. Regulator Ofgem has ordered all domestic energy companies to suspend the practice and says it's opening its biggest ever market review into the meters. Anti-Brexit campaigner Gina Miller has become the latest person to accuse the Deputy Prime Minister of bullying. She says Dominic Raab launched an abusive attack and was aggressive and intimidating during an encounter in 2016. A source close to the Justice Secretary described the claims as malicious and baseless, saying they were timed to jump on a political bandwagon. Shadow Immigration Minister Stephen Kinnock says it's time for Mr Raab to go.
I think it's pretty clear now that everybody that works around him is going to have some serious doubts about whether or not they should be coming into work today. There seems to be a pattern of behaviour from Mr Raab, and it's not fair on his colleagues that they are having to work with somebody who is potentially a bully and a tyrant and somebody who disrespects the colleagues that he works with. So he should be suspended.
Rail passengers are facing more travel disruption today, with train drivers walking out for the second time this week. RMT and ASLEF union members are demanding better pay and conditions. Rail operators warning services will be severely disrupted, with little to no trains running in some parts of the country. ASLEF General Secretary Mick Whelan says the union wants talks to continue to find a solution.
Quite deceitfully, the RDG put out a protocol which they led for a payoff for over 2 years that hadn't been discussed with this trade union, hadn't been through the framework agreement that we'd agreed with them to allow some sort of national talks to take place in our fractionalised industry, and it's probably set the whole process back months and months. If they want to negotiate via the media, I'll tell you what I want, and then you can relay it to them. They can come and talk to us in a few weeks' time. But we don't behave like that. We behave honourably. So we'll go back into talks on Tuesday in the hope that trust can be rebuilt and we can find a way forward.
New analysis shows the number of people in the UK diagnosed with cancer will rise by a third by 2040. Cancer research has found that if current trends continue, cases will rise from 384,000 per year to over 500,000 for the first time. The charity says that as well as an ageing population, obesity is also contributing to the rise. And a suspected Chinese spy balloon is being tracked by the US military. It's been spotted flying over America for a couple of days now. Fighter jets were mobilised, but a decision was made not to shoot it down because the debris could pose a safety risk. It comes ahead of a trip to Beijing by the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. China says it hopes both sides can handle the matter calmly. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to you, Esther and Philip.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Yes, it's back to us. And back to you and your views. Eve said here, I voted to leave and still believe it's the right thing to do. We had that Brexit debate earlier. The government is to blame for what has happened. We, as a country, could be one of the best in the world if the government got its act together. I have to say, lots of views like that were coming in.
Lots of views on lots of things. Patricia says, Burko hasn't changed, thinks he knows best. The civil service has done its best to thwart us passing laws that benefit the UK and get us properly out of the EU because they don't want it. Also, being predominantly left-wing, they will do anything to stop Brexit. Proof is the way that they don't like being told to do their job and actually get back to work in the office. Yes, Minister seems to be alive and well. Good show as usual. Esther for PM, says Patricia.
Why, thank you very much indeed. But John says here, we've been badly let down over Brexit. Those in power are determined to keep us in. And as I said, lots of you have been saying that.
Brian says, love the new programme, Farage versus Burko. Best debate on TV for years. Please bring them back. But Stanley, he has a different view to the most, so it's important to put different views out there. He says, yes, we should rejoin the EU, because we are obviously incapable of being an independent, sovereign country who can run their own affairs, and we clearly need the people in Brussels to hold our hand and govern us from abroad because of our complete ineptitude.
Now, I don't know if he's being hugely sarcastic there, As in really, really pig sick, we haven't done a better job of it so far, or whether he thinks we should rejoin. But anyway, in fact, virtually everyone is saying get on with Brexit and do it properly.
Yes.
Anyway, well, look, there's loads still coming on the show. Loads of you are still getting in touch, and please do. But according to a recent poll, just 27% of voters believe that Rishi Sunak has done a good job so far, indicating that the PM has struggled to overcome the myriad of challenges over the past 100 days.
So does Rishi Sunak have a chance to turn his fortunes around? We're joined now by Conservative MP Peter Bone, who was a strong supporter of Boris Johnson and supported Liz Truss. So, Peter, given your background, how do you think Rishi's doing? Has he won you over in his first 100 days in office?
Well, first thing, your viewers are very sensible, because saying Esther for PM, well, maybe good. But how about Esther for party chairman right now? Wouldn't that be a good move? Look,
flattery will get you nowhere, Peter.
The current Prime Minister has been in office for 100 days. It's too early to say whether it's going to be successful. But he's doing the right things. He's calmed the economy down. He's tried to tackle the waiting lists in the NHS with two big announcements from the Secretary of State for Health. And of course, we're getting rid of all EU retained law by the end of the year, which are all good things. The one thing, though, I think he has to demonstrate is to stop the small boat crossings. Thousands and thousands of people coming here illegally, basically from France, is unacceptable. And the Prime Minister says it's unacceptable. So we're waiting sort of any day now for a bill that will end that. And we've really, I think where we are with the 100, look, I went to Warwick University yesterday to speak to young Conservatives, and we had about 50 there, and they're the future of the Conservative Party. They were bright and they cheered Margaret Thatcher, and I thought things are well. And I asked them about this 100 days, and they said basically they think it's wait and see. He's done fine so far, but we've now got to deliver, and I think that's a fair.
What would they like to see him do? What would they like to see him do?
Well, we discussed all the different issues, and which was interesting, the main issue was actually small boats. And you sometimes think that younger Conservatives have different priorities, but that was the number one issue. They wanted to see taxes coming down, and they wanted to see improvement in the NHS. And we also discussed the problems with housing, because in some parts of the country, young people can't afford houses, but in other parts of the country, it's available. So, and I said to them, well, if you buy a house now, for £400,000 somewhere, do you really want to see that go down in price in the next few years so that more people can buy a house? Well, of course they don't. So the issue that really we concluded on that was, if we cut down on the immigration, we used to have from the EU 250,000 people a year coming in, we would have more houses available for our constituents. So I thought that made a lot of sense.
People talk about the small boats and it's really important and everything. They sort of seem to pin the blame on Rishi that he hasn't sorted it out. But of course, this is a problem he inherited from his two predecessors. It wasn't something that he created. So, I mean, is it unfair for people to sort of pin the blame on the small boats on Rishi Sunak when this was happening under Boris Johnson?
I don't think it's fair to, and I don't think actually that's what those young Conservatives were doing last night. What they're saying is he now has the opportunity to fix it. Now, when Boris was running the country, of course, he got Brexit done, and then we had a period of COVID. We got the first vaccination in Western Europe under Boris, and he had to deal with a war in Europe. And then perhaps he was on the verge of perhaps dealing with the boat crisis when he lost his job, and then we had Liz Truss for a little while, and it's passed on to. I don't think they blame Rishi for the small boats, but they do think he's got to sort it out.
And just finally, Peter, is Rishi Sunak's position secure? I mean, or is the momentum behind wanting to bring Boris back still there, or has that dissipated? Is Rishi Sunak now certain to lead the Conservatives into the next election?
There's lots of people ask that question. Yeah. Is he there now?
Well, I certainly know that if Boris was answering this question, he'd say you've got to absolutely get behind Rishi and he'd lead us into the next general election. However, on the streets of Wellingborough, people say, when is Boris coming back? Look, I've learned one thing, Philip and Esther, is that you never predict what's going to happen in politics. And I think Rishi will do a good job if he leads us into the next general election. But if he doesn't, I'll support whoever is leading it. But I do think we need a new party chairman, and Esther seems the person for that job.
Despite what she says, Peter, flattery will get you everywhere. So you keep at it. Thank you so much indeed for taking the time to join us this morning. We really appreciate it. So, Daniel, I mean, you were a big Boris supporter. How do you think Rishi's done in his first 100 days?
Well, I'm a Conservative peer, and I'd like to be as supportive as Peter Bone has been. But, I mean, the fact is that the poll ratings are showing that Rishi's ratings are not recovering, or they're not advancing. And he is.
But then in a YouGov poll, they say, you know, Rishi is a better Prime Minister than Johnson's been in a YouGov poll.
Yeah,
by a small margin.
That might be true as well, but they're still in a very, very difficult position. And I think one of the complaints made is that the Conservative Party is, in policy terms now, indistinguishable from the Labour Party. You can't tell the difference between the two. So is he a real Conservative? I know he wants to narrow down the areas of political discourse to the 5 targets he's set and get people talking about those. But I don't think events are going to allow him. And I'm very worried about what might be going on in relation to Northern Ireland. So I think he's in for some very, very choppy waters, and he's got to step up.
Well, he has had a difficult 100 days. People would say it's been dominated by strikes and scandals. But Louise, from your point of view, somebody who has a big business women's organisation, somebody who works with in business, what do you think of Rishi?
Well, Rishi's a technocrat, isn't he? Maybe we need a technocrat at the minute to get a handle on the numbers, but actually I don't see him as a leader. Like Boris, you sort of, you hang on to his word, a good speaker, a good orator. I have to say, the feedback, if you want the feedback from the business world, they've never been so despondent with the political establishment, present company accepted. So we really need to grab this. There's a lack of respect. We've got law and order issues, a general deterioration in standards. So we need to demonstrate that. Rishi needs to lead that and get that together.
I mean, after the chaos of the Liz Truss administration, do people in business think that at least Rishi's steadied the ship? Do they at least give him credit for that? Or?
Absolutely. I mean, he calmed the markets, and that was something that was a real issue for businesses over that short term, so they do feel a little bit calmer. He's also managed to continue to support Ukraine, so he will say that that's one of the positive things that he's done so far in his 100 days.
But the good thing is, from our viewers, at least they feel positive about Britain. They keep saying we're a great nation, we need to go.
More proud of the country.
They want us to be more proud of the country. Daniel, Louise, stay with us.
Now, could working from home be holding Britain back from making an economic comeback?
That's what Adam Stott, the founder of Big Business Events, believes, and we're delighted to say that he joins us now.
Hello, how are we doing?
We're doing really well there. So I hope you're not at home there. I can't really tell as you're on a Zoom. So what is so wrong with people working at home?
So first of all, no, I'm not at home. I'm currently running an event, training business owners to increase their speaking and communication skills. In terms of working from home, I feel it has a very detrimental impact on building a culture, young people, and it's my strong belief that it doesn't help in any area of the business. It doesn't help people to develop their careers. It doesn't help business owners. It doesn't help employees. And I feel it's something that in order for us to make a stronger comeback, we need to build great people. And great people are built through a mentoring process usually. And I feel that the mentoring process is hugely affected when people don't get time to, and people learn in a different way. So we've got different styles of learning. And a lot of people learn visually. So they learn from seeing things done and actually learning from example. And I feel that not actually having access to working with people and around people that are at a higher level really does slow down people's growth. If we want to build great people for the future, we've got to replace the mentorship process.
I get that, and I understand about the culture and building a teamwork and people learning from other people. I get all of that. But in terms of people's actual productivity themselves, does it really matter whether they're working in the office or working from home? I mean, isn't that really just a question of whether their manager is good or not, and judging people on their their output rather than their input.
Absolutely, but if you look at the actually people working from home and you look at the productivity, people tend to be more productive in an environment where they feel inspired, and they're in an environment where they feel that they can get feedback and exchange. And in terms of a manager, you can be a great manager and you can congratulate your employees, you can give them great feedback, you can help them. But the bottom line is text message saying well done is not going to put that same smile on that person's face. It's not going to build the confidence in the same way or a quick Zoom call say, oh, by the way, you did great. It doesn't have the same meaning as sitting down with somebody, looking them in the eye and making them feel great, which
Thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Now, coming up...
And I agree. I don't know why anybody wants to work from home, to be perfectly honest. I mean, it seems like the most miserable existence in the world working from home. So I'm with him.
I totally agree. We're in agreement.
We're in agreement.
But coming up, we're talking about school strikes. What did you think about them? I mean, yet more disruption for our young kids, how it affected them. So don't go anywhere.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. It's 11:20 with some breaking news right now. A man caught in Windsor Castle with a crossbow has pleaded guilty to treason. GB News reporter Cameron Walker joins us now to tell us more.
Yes, Esther. So this man who trespassed within the grounds of Windsor Castle on Christmas Day back in 2021, you may remember it was the late Queen's last Christmas, as it turned out. She was there with other members of the royal family, and Jaswant Chahal, who's 21, he was arrested. He told an armed officer that he was there to kill the late Queen, and this was heard by two soldiers from the Grenadier Guards as well. He had recorded a video 4 days earlier in which he made the same claim. So at the Old Bailey today, he pleaded guilty to making threats to kill, possession of an offensive weapon, and an offence under the 1842 Treason Act. Now, police officers have said nobody was hurt in the incident. When he was told to drop his loaded crossbow, he did oblige. The crossbow was loaded, though, and it was ready to fire. The safety catch was in the off position. This Crown Prosecution Service says the crossbow that he used or was planning to use was found comparable to an air rifle, a powerful air rifle with the potential to cause serious or fatal injuries. So he entered his plea, Jaswant Chahal, from Broadmoor Hospital, and he will be sentenced at a later date.
I was shocked about the treason. I mean, I can't remember the last time somebody was found guilty of treason. Do you know when that was, Cameron?
Yes, there's two separate treason acts. You've got the 1842 Treason Act, which makes it an offence to assault the sovereign or kind of cause alarm to the sovereign. That was following a couple of incidents involving Queen Victoria travelling down the Mall and having a pistol pointed in the direction of her, but not actually fired, just causing alarm. There's also a separate, more serious Treason Act, the High Treason Act, which dates back to the 1300s, which is intent to actually kill the sovereign in question. But the last person to be convicted under the Treason Act of 1842, we believe, was Marcus Sargent in 1981. He was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment after pleading guilty to firing blank shots at Queen Elizabeth II when she was on parade.
So that might give some indication to the length of sentence that could be coming.
So we'll have to wait and see.
When is he going to be sentenced?
We don't know. It's a later date.
We don't know. Amazing that somebody's been found guilty of treason. I find that quite staggering.
They've sent him to the Tower.
Yeah, well, they should do, shouldn't they?
Yeah.
Quite right.
Long drawn and quartered, perhaps.
Oh, gosh, you are a hardliner.
I think the rules have changed since then.
Cameron Walker, thank you very much indeed for bringing us that latest news as it happens here on GB News.
He'll be hoping you're not the judge when he gets sentenced. Now, more than half of schools across England were closed or in reduced attendance on Wednesday after the biggest teaching union decided to strike over pay.
More strikes are planned over the coming weeks, prompting fears over the disruption to children's education. We're joined now by Molly Kingsley, the founder of Us For Them, a charity which campaigns for children. So, Molly, when you heard that schools will be closed yet again, only this time due to strike action, what were your thoughts for the children and parents you support?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point parents have a right to just feel utter despair. And I think, views are mixed on this, more mixed. I think there is support certainly among our parent community, or at least some sympathy with the teachers. That said, I think parents, and I would certainly say this of myself, just believe that any, right to cause further disruption has been lost. Because if you think of the role that these unions played in, baying for school closures and baying for these very harmful mitigations on children, to think that now they want to cause more disruption, it really jars with the need to get children back into school. And actually, Amanda Spielman, who is the head of Ofsted, said something really interesting on this. And what she said quite recently was that the social contract between schooling and parent has been broken. So, we are teaching children that school isn't important. And 1 in 4 of them, even before the strikes, were now persistently absent. And how can we expect to really rebuild that covenant if in the same breath we are closing their schools again?
I totally agree with that, Phil.
Totally
it's optional. You might go in, you might not, because that's what your teachers do.
The thing is, parents get fined if they don't send the kids to school, don't they? But that's a different debate. But Molly, what just set out? Obviously we had the terrible situation during the COVID lockdowns where schools were, in my opinion, shamefully closed down during that period. Just set out from your perspective the damage that's done by keeping children away from school and being at home.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we have more evidence than I think any of us ever wanted to see on this now. But, we know that it is bad across the board for children. And, children in year 11, so that's GCSE year children, have only had 1 year since starting secondary school of uninterrupted schooling. And actually, there was a report out, somewhat ironically, just earlier this week, a National Audit Office report that really reinforces how behind some children are. And I think one of the points here, and I know it's something you both feel strongly about, but, one of the points is that, of course, it's not all children fare the same. Inevitably, already disadvantaged children do worse when schools close. They're the ones that don't have the support, certainly from teachers. They may not have laptops, and they certainly don't have, sometimes don't have access to the kind of outdoor space and the garden, which at least if children aren't working, they can keep themselves healthy and happy. And it's a really, really sad picture. We know the attainment gap. Sorry, go on, Esther.
Oh, I was going to say, Molly, we also knew, because that damning Ofsted report all about self-harm, sort of mental health issues, all the damage that had gone on, as well as the educational gap. That being the case and having so much disruption to education, would you now say the government should make sure that teachers can't strike going forward?
I mean, I think what we need to do here is simple. We need to put schools on an essential infrastructure footing. And, you know, one of your colleagues, Robert Halfon, when he was chair of the Education Select Committee, brought forward this brilliant bill that would effectively mean schools were treated as, you know, recognises the reality that for children, schools are as essential as, you know, hospitals perhaps are for adults, and, you know, as essential as any blue light service really for safeguarding and for education. So yeah, they need to be recognised as essential. I would say that they do need to be put beyond strike action. I think it is, you know, I respect that workers want, and some would say need, the right to strike, but equally, in my view, a child's right to be kept safe in school and to have an education overrides that right.
Molly Kingsley, thank you very much indeed, and for all that you do for children and parents.
So, Louise, what do you think about this point about teachers being banned from going on strike? Do you think that they should, the government should maybe say, look, we'll always honour a pay review body, whatever they say, but in return, you can't go on strike?
Yeah, a couple of things there. I think essential infrastructure is a must for schools. I mean, look at the disruption. What do people do with their children? They can't go to work. Sometimes they won't get paid. It just creates complete chaos. Education is so important, isn't it? We have to make sure we've got a great system for education and support that.
Some of the heads of schools didn't know who was striking or not, so they couldn't plan for what they were doing. Now, that must be shameful, that you didn't even know whether your teachers were in tomorrow or not.
Yeah, I think I'm very chary of banning people's right to strikes. I think they do have a right to withdraw their labour, I must say, but we've always had conditions on that, and the conditions of actually giving notice when you're going to be on strike and who's going to be on strike, which you don't have to give at the moment, that I think should be imposed in cases like schools and hospitals and so on, so that people can actually plan, because the education of the children, I mean, who can disagree with Molly? I mean, you know, the education of the children is absolutely paramount and vital.
I mean, the other point is that Louise made is that actually lots of people, as a result of the strike, often people who are much lower paid than teachers, were unable to get to work and lost a day's pay because they had to stay at home and look after their kids.
Yeah, well, that's another consequence, but I feel sorry for those. But that is a day's pay lost, whereas the perpetual and constant disruption of children's education has lifetime effects. And I think that really is the thing to focus on. Right? So I feel sorry if someone's lost a day's pay, but that is important and it's hurtful. But the lifetime effects of the damage to education are really important.
Daniel, Louise, thank you very much indeed. I don't know what our viewers think, whether you shouldn't be able to strike, or at least put a minimal service in there and make sure those sitting exams at the moment would not have been disrupted by that strike action. Anyway, coming up, we'll be joined by Professor David Livermore to discuss whether face masks were a mistake and how many COVID boosters do we actually need. But first, here's the news headlines with Rhiannon.
Esther, thank you. It's 11:31. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The partner of a missing woman says he's focusing on staying strong for their two daughters. There are growing concerns for the welfare of Nicola Bulley, who went missing a week ago in Lancashire. The 45-year-old was last seen walking her dog just before 9 a.m. last Friday in St Michael's-on-Wye. Her phone and dog were found by the river half an hour later. Nicola's partner, Paul Ansell, says he hopes people will come forward with new information.
Every single scenario comes to a brick wall, every single one of them. And then all we're doing is sitting there going round and round and round, going through every scenario, and then go back to the first scenario again and do the whole thing again. And it's just all day long. That's all we're doing. That's all we're doing.
A man who was carrying a crossbow on the grounds of Windsor Castle on Christmas Day in 2021 has admitted trying to harm Queen Elizabeth. 21-year-old Jaswant Singh Chahal pleaded guilty to 3 charges, including an offence under the Treason Act. His crossbow was loaded with bolts, with the safety catch off and ready to fire. The late Queen was in residence at the time. And disgraced pop star Gary Glitter has been freed from jail after serving half of his 16-year sentence for sex offences. The 79-year-old, who had a string of hits in the 1970s, was jailed in 2015 for sexually abusing 3 schoolgirls. The sex offender, who left a low-security prison in Dorset, will now be subject to licence conditions. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Esther and Philip will be back in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
and right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 11:36. Lots of you have been getting in touch, particularly after the discussion we had about Ukraine, after a poll suggested that support in the UK was waning.
Yeah, Gary says, I'd just like to express my thanks for at long last putting over a different point of view on the Ukraine war. I've been asking you to do this for many months, so Gary's pleased about that. Alice says, I totally agree with David Curtin. We have no business in Ukraine. Putin represents no threat to this country, and this wouldn't have happened without constant interference from the EU and others in the region.
Caroline says, in my small opinion, if only the Western countries had had enough guts in the beginning to provide Ukraine with fighter jets and tanks, then this war would have been over now.
And John says, David is wrong. David Curtin is wrong. We cannot allow Putin to win. The people of Ukraine have been slaughtered, and he would allow that. Sorry, David, sometimes in your life, you have to take a stand for what is right.
And Carol says, Boris gives everything, or had have given everything to Ukraine. We will have nothing here for us. It's absurd what we're suggesting. Ukraine have been given enough funding and enough support for now, or by now.
And lots of other opinions on other things that we've been talking about as well, about Brexit. Graham says, am I disappointed with Brexit? Yes, I am. Would I vote Brexit again? Yes, definitely. What are my feelings towards the Tories in their handling of Brexit?
Do I want to hear this?
I will never vote Tory again in my lifetime, nor will I vote Labour or Lib Dem for that matter. However, I will vote for any political party that Nigel Farage lends his name to. And Jeff says you should definitely get Farage and Bercow back on for a debate, but is there any chance you could put a mute button on Bercow's mic? Such an annoying know-all.
But I did say at the time, didn't I? If the gallery could just silence Bercow for this little while, we could have carried on. But we will have them back. And actually, I think we need them in the studio. We could have possibly been able to get a shepherd's hook and whacked one off if they were talking for too long.
We definitely should.
Now, look, we've, as I said, lots coming in. Still keep those views coming in. Now, did we really ever need to wear face masks? And how many COVID booster jabs should you be getting? That's what lots of people are asking. Joining us now is Professor of Microbiology, Professor David Livermore. So, after the Cochrane review came out this week about the efficacy of face masks, should we ever have been wearing them?
Answer is no. The Cochrane review, which looked at 78 previous trials of face masks, comes to the conclusion they provide little or no benefit for protecting against influenza-like infection, against COVID, whether that was laboratory confirmed or just defined by people saying they've got respiratory symptoms. Little or no benefit.
Now, some people will hear little, though, and say, but that is some. So what we're saying, you didn't need to, but if there's a choice there, if somebody wanted to wear them, are you still saying, well, what was the point? But some people will hear little and get a bit of hope from mask wearing.
Little or no means no statistically significant benefit. So you want to wear a face mask, it's not going to harm you, that's your choice. But there is little or no benefit from doing so. And there's also the point in this Cochrane review that the harms of face masks were not looked at. And they impede communication. They interfere with children learning facial expressions and gestures, learning language skills. So little or no benefit, and trials have done very little to look at the harms of face masks. But if you want to wear a face mask, sure, it's your business. But there should never have been fines of up to £6,400 for repeatedly not wearing one on the train. That was outrageous.
So can we take this now as the last word on this particular subject on face masks? I mean, will now this mean that will the scientific community now rally round this report and say, well, actually, this is the definitive answer, and that, in effect, the chief medical officer was wrong, the chief scientific officer was wrong when they said that we should all wear a face mask? Are these people now going to say, we were wrong?
Well, one would hope so, but it's become so politicised. And don't forget that the chief medical officer and the chief scientific officer, right back at the start, in March 2020, were saying essentially what's now been found, little or no benefit. They were right in the first place. And yet somehow they pivoted to saying, you must wear one, and a fine of up to £6,400 for repeatedly failing to do so.
There was a suspicion that they were leaned on by maybe Matt Hancock or so. And that the World Health Organization was also leaned on to say people should wear a
Well, there's two
a
things,
face
isn't
mask,
there? You
wasn't
talk about politicisation, but then an industry sprung up selling masks. I mean, there were lots of people then who got on board to make sure masks were worn.
Quite. I mean, a lot of people, a lot of companies did very well out of selling face masks to people.
And when...
Perhaps they're the people who should be getting windfall taxes rather than the oil companies. You know, if you want windfall tax on an oil company, you discourage it from investing in North Sea development, which may be critical to energy security. On the other hand, these people who sold face masks that were quite useless, I would rather welcome a windfall tax on them.
Absolutely. Now, do we want to talk to you about vaccines as well, David? Because obviously there's been much controversy recently about the safety or otherwise of this vaccine or that vaccine, taking the booster jabs, all the rest of it. I think many people out there feel extremely confused about whether or not this is a good thing, whether they should go for their third, fourth, fifth booster every so often. What as an expert in this field, what's your view on that?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that initially the vaccines did some good. I part company totally from the anti-vaxxers there. If you go back to the spring of 2021, when the vaccines came in, they certainly broke the relationship between infections and deaths. And even if you look into the early part of last year, where countries in the Far East were first hit by COVID, they'd kept it out until then, and they were hit by Omicron. You compare South Korea and Singapore with very high levels of vaccination in the over 80s. They had far fewer deaths than Hong Kong with low levels of vaccination. So at least in the early stages, vaccines did good. But the concern now is that at least for the over 50s, the recommendations coming out of the JCVI, the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, is repeated vaccination, and that by autumn of this year, folks will be up to their 6th shot if they follow advice. Now, is this sensible? These vaccines were never trialled for multiple use in this way. There's a study out from the Cleveland Clinic in the United States looking at its own staff and about 50,000 people who've been having repeated vaccinations. And it's being found that the more shots they have, the more likely it is that they actually get COVID. You look at Japan, where the average over 65 is now up to their 5th shot, and the peaks of deaths each time in Japan are creeping up. Does repeated inoculation with these products, the mRNA products in particular, lead to some counter-suppression of immunity? It needs looking into. I don't say it's definitively harmful, but it needs looking into and urgently.
If you thought it was going to be 1 vaccination and a booster, and then maybe 2, like you said, when it's up to 6, that does need research going into it. Daniel, where do you sit on this?
I'm worried about this. I mean, I've had my 4th, I've had 4 jabs, and I haven't been offered a 5th yet, but maybe it'll come round. And I'm now getting increasingly concerned. Previously, I would have said, yeah, and I did say, yes, queue up, make the appointment and get the jab. But I'm increasingly concerned because I'm not entirely sure what I'm being protected against anymore, and I don't have a sense of COVID threat in the environment in any event. So maybe with the uncertainty around the side effects potentially or the ineffectiveness of the vaccine, when they come around to offer me the next one, I may think twice about it.
And I think that's all people want, isn't it? To understand what does it mean. And there's the differences between age groups. So again, we all went back to if you were older, if you were vulnerable, maybe you should, but if you were younger, if you were healthy, no, you wouldn't. I don't know if you've got a view on this, Louise.
Yeah, I share Daniel's concerns, really. I just had 2 jabs and then no more. I don't think that I will have any more. I don't feel as though I need to. And it is a worry that we've vaccinated the world with an untested, gone through the proper protocol, vaccine. So we don't yet know what the fallout's going to be of that for the medium and long term. So it is a worry.
And you know what I'm liking here? We're having sort of a calm debate, asking questions, just asking for more research. Are we a bit uncertain? Which is fine, you can be uncertain.
I mean, David, what should the government do? Because, of course, what the government would say, presumably, is that, look, there's this group here, they're the experts, they're the Joint Committee on Vaccines and Immunisation. We therefore are going to listen to what they say and follow that. Are you saying that the government should maybe be more challenging to what they're saying or ask for more research to be carried out? What should the government do?
I think they need to challenge the views coming out of the JCVI more. They need to ask why. They need to take in alternative views. They need to demand that the JCVI considers results such as those that have come out of the Cleveland Clinic on the more vaccinated now getting more COVID infections. They need to consider those data from Japan with rising death rates from COVID despite such heavy vaccination. It's very difficult to do new research simply because so many people have been vaccinated that it's hard to get a control group together now. But nevertheless, we must have these debates because of the hazard that repeated inoculation with the same product is actually going to lead to some sort of immune suppression. It's being noted, and look, I'm a microbiologist, I'm not an immunologist, but the immunologists are noting that a particular subclass of immunoglobulin, of antibody, IgG4, is being induced through multiple inoculations.
Professor David Livermore, thank you very much indeed, and I'm glad you've sort of voiced those issues and asking for more research. I also want to say thank you as well to our other guests. Louise, thank you very much. Daniel, thank you very much, and hopefully have you on pretty soon. And today marks 1 week since mother of two, Nicola Bulley, first went missing while walking her dog alongside the River Wye in Lancashire last Friday morning after dropping her two daughters to the local primary school.
Nicola's family are desperately searching for answers as the police search continues, with her two daughters, aged 6 and 9, desperate for their mummy back.
Joining us now from Lancashire is GB News reporter Theo.
Good morning. Yes, it's a week on since Nicola's disappearance. She was last seen in this area after she had taken her children to school, and she was walking her dog in this area near this riverbank. And over the last few days, there have been extensive searches, various teams, various agencies, and the police working to find where Nicola is. And this morning, many of her community members here have been out on the main roads holding placards, which have been saying if you have any dash cam footage, please do get in touch and call 101. And they're saying they're not going to give up, and they're going to do this so that the family as well get some answers. And earlier on, her husband, or partner shall I say, spoke about how the family's been feeling over the last few days.
Single scenario comes to a brick wall, every single one of them, and then all we're doing is sitting there going round and round and round, going through every scenario, and then go back to the first scenario again and do the whole thing again, and it's just all day long. That's all we're doing. That's all we're doing.
How are you coping? It must be so difficult. Like you say, your focus is on the girls, and it has to be. But yeah, it must be so difficult.
I don't know how I'm coping. I don't even want to actually think about that. Just focus. Just like I say, it's just about the girls. That's it. I'm there for them.
And over the last few days, we understand several witnesses have been on appeal from the police, and they've been wanting to speak to some of those people who may have seen Nicola last week, and they've said they've been able to trace them and are working with them to understand what happened during that time, and of course as part of their investigations. Now, we do understand there have been reports this morning about some of the text that she was sending that morning, one which was saying she sent a close message to a friend whose mortgage she had recently signed off to arrange the girls to go out for a tea, and that's been reported this morning. But aside from that, investigations are continuing. Just a few moments ago, I saw some scuba diving teams, and they'll be out here continuing their investigations alongside many of the other agencies who are out here this morning and into the rest of the day.
Theo Chicomba, thank you very much indeed for keeping us up to date with this story.
Awful, isn't it? Can't imagine what a family must be going through. Those two daughters, absolutely terrible. Anyway, let's now welcome Sarah Robertson to take a look at the biggest stories from the entertainment world. Sarah, thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
What have you got for us?
Oh, this is an absolute humdinger of a showbiz weekend coming up. So Happy Valley, the finale, the absolute showdown, comes this Sunday. It's the last ever episode of the Happy Valley series. Last week saw over 9 million viewers tune in to the penultimate episode. It has. It's like the new Line of Duty. So everyone's wondering, what is this final episode going to be like? And we've been teased clips from the show itself, and Sarah Lancashire, who plays Sergeant Catherine Kaywood, who's the heroine of the tale, is she going to get her happy ending? She apparently has this showdown with her arch nemesis, played by James Norton, Tommy Lee Royce, who is the killer. He's escaped from prison. He's on the run. He's trying to lure Ryan, his son, Catherine's grandson, into escaping with him to Spain. Is he going to succeed, or is Catherine going to meet up with him and they're going to have this showdown? And there's so many loose ends as well with other killers and other things going on. So Sarah Lancashire, she said she actually had the finale changed. Yes, she did. She wasn't happy with the ending. She went to Sally Wainwright, the writer. Sally agreed.
Wow.
Did a change. So apparently all of the cast... Yes, she's amazing, isn't she? I can't wait for this.
Now, I'm
can't
a
wait.
politician, Sarah, so I'm allowed to be out of touch.
Okay.
Right? And I've never seen Happy Valley. But
you don't know what you're missing,
I sort of do know what I'm missing, because every time I speak to my mum, she says, "Are you watching Happy Valley yet? Are you watching Happy Valley?" It's the best thing I've ever seen on TV. You've got to watch it. And I still have it. I'll have to try and watch it on catch-up, because everyone I speak to says, "Oh, you know, Happy Valley's brilliant."
You will blast through it, honestly. Once you start, it's one of those shows that you just binge. Like, you get really into it, like Line of Duty. You just want to binge it all.
Harry and Meghan being seen together?
Yes, they have for the first time. Now, it's been a bit strange, because obviously with what went on with the documentary and the book as well, you know, their popularity in America has plummeted, especially Harry's, Meghan's too. And they've
not doing so great in the UK either, is it?
No, not at all. So this is very interesting. So they've sort of been spending, I wouldn't say time apart, but they've not been seen in public together, and questions have been raised. People have been asking, is everything well, you know, in the mansion, the Montecito mansion? But here they are, back together, although they weren't actually back together.
No, I saw that. They were the opposite side of the room.
Yes,
they weren't
Esther. Well, because Meghan's got this nickname among detractors known as the Claw, because she's always like hanging on to Prince Harry. The Claw's always out holding on to him. But in this shot that we've seen from the video at Ellen and Portia de Rossi, Ellen's wife, it was their vow renew, so the renewal of their vows. They weren't. They were on opposite sides of the room.
Should we read something into that, then?
Well, I think we should.
Well, what would you? Because go on. What do you read into it? Because I've got things to read into it.
I think that there's tension between them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I was speaking to other people who are sort of publicists and sort of they said, no, what they're doing is maximising the money. So you've seen what Harry's doing. You'll then see on the back of that what's Meghan's doing. Then aren't they together? Then they do something together. It's a way of keeping them with their Netflix series and their books. That's all it's about, money-making. Together, apart, together, apart. Do you think plausible?
Yes, I mean, there could be an element to that, but I think there's other things going on.
Are we any nearer to them?
Hang on. Other things going on?
Yeah, I'm not saying any more. I'm not giving anything away, but...
Not at this stage.
Not at this stage.
Is she disappointed in him?
I think she is disappointed in the reaction, and that wasn't what she was expecting, and so she wants to distance herself from that, and... If Harry's going to go down, she ain't going to go down with him.
Are we any closer to knowing whether they're going to get to the coronation or not? Whether they're going to be invited to the coronation?
They have been invited. Charles still takes the stance that they're loved members of the family.
So do we know if they're going to come?
But whether they're going to come, we still don't know yet. But I've been told that Meghan does want to be there, and she thinks that they both should
booking
make
a
an
camera
appearance.
crew, seeing if they've got availability, and if they and the photographer have got availability, they'll all be there. Sarah, I tell you, full of intrigue, full of the inside information. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
What a day we've had today, though.
Absolutely.
Farage and Burko with their little Brexit bust-up. We had them here. Lots of you wanting them to do a show together every day. We'll get that sorted. So really a great show. But that is it. It's come to an end. A massive thank you to everybody with us as well, Louise Oliver and Lord Daniel Moylan, who were with us all morning too.
And thank you to Sarah Robertson too. Don't forget to join us tomorrow at 10 o'clock. But up next, it's the marvellous Andrew Pearce. Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. Friday's looking dry for the majority, pretty mild out there this morning as well. Not a huge amount of sunshine, most places staying fairly drab. High pressure is in control, certainly across the south. We've got low pressure and these weather fronts linking back, which are bringing a lot of cloud and in places damp starts, light rain and drizzle, clearing from Northern Ireland, but still affecting parts of northwest England. And it will be another fairly damp morning for western Scotland. The rain won't be as heavy as yesterday, and it will push away to the north, so much of the west coast will become dry through the afternoon. Northwest England should also slowly turn a bit drier. Some brighter skies for Wales and southwest England. Could see some sunny spells further east as well. And it is mild temperatures this afternoon, getting up to maybe 13, perhaps 14 Celsius, where we see some sunshine. Even where it's damp in northern Scotland, temperatures are above average. The rain will continue to trickle across the Northern Isles through Friday evening. There'll be a bit of drizzle here and there around western coasts and hills, but for most places it's a dry night. There'll be a few breaks in the cloud, a few clearer spells, which may allow temperatures to drop down to 4 or 5 Celsius, but certainly for most towns and cities, we'll see the temperatures holding up at 6 or 7. So a mild start to the weekend, and for most it'll be a dry day on Saturday, certainly for England and Wales. Some drizzle around the coast and hills of Wales, and we will see some rain heading into Scotland and Northern Ireland. Initially into the northwest. By lunchtime that'll be spreading across Northern Ireland and then through central and southern Scotland during Saturday afternoon. It won't rain all day, it will move through. And western parts of Northern Ireland, northwest Scotland likely to turn a bit brighter through the afternoon. For most of England and Wales, much of the day will be dry and again mild, double figures almost across the board. But look at Sunday's temperatures, single figures. It will be turning cooler, but as well as that, we'll have light winds on Sunday and plenty of sunshine.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, you're watching and listening to Andrew Pearce here on GB News. I'm with you until 2 o'clock. Here's what's coming up. A man has admitted trying to harm the Queen after being caught in the grounds of Windsor Castle with a loaded crossbow. We'll have the latest from our royal correspondent. Yesterday, 100 days since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. Haven't they been marvellous? It's not been smooth sailing, has it? In fact, it's been turbulent.